Picture Florida. What comes to mind? Sunshine, beaches, theme parks, endless entertainment. A kingdom of imagination poured from concrete, powered by dreams, and sold to the world as an escape. But before all of that, this was Florida. A wild, untamed frontier. A place where the growl of a panther was more common than the roar of an engine. Where immense prairies stretched farther than the eye could see, and survival depended on grit rather than convenience. And tucked into a forgotten corner of the state, just steps from a roaring interstate, there's a quiet place that still holds the stories of those early lives, their struggles, their losses, their resilience. So what happened to the people buried at Wild Cow Prairie Cemetery? And what can their final resting place tell us about the real Florida, the one that existed long before the first tourist ever arrived? To understand this place, we have to go back, way back, before highways, before retirement communities, before the mouse. The year is the 1840s. Florida has just become a state, and most of the peninsula remains a dangerous, largely unmapped wilderness. In 1842, the U.S. government passed the Armed Occupation Act. It was a stark deal. Settle the land south of Gainesville, build a home, farm 5 acres, carry a gun, and in return, you'd receive 160 acres of your own. It was an invitation to the brave, the desperate, and the fiercely independent. Many settlers answered that call here, to a vast stretch of open land known as Wild Cow Prairie, named for the herds of tough, free-roaming cattle and ponies left behind by Spanish explorers centuries earlier. At sunrise and sunset, early accounts described the prairie alive with birds, flamingos, egrets, and countless others, feeding along the wetlands just south of where the cemetery now stands. At the heart of this frontier flowed the Withlacoochee River, and at a critical crossing point, a small settlement took shape, Pemberton Ferry. By 1876, the town had formed around the ferry, becoming an essential transportation hub. Stagecoaches crossed here, steamboats traveled the river, and eventually 2 busy railroad lines intersected at Pemberton Ferry, connecting Sumter County to Hernando County and beyond. But life here was fragile, and where there is struggle, there is loss. In 1849, the community recorded its first burial. William D. Bolden Sr., son-in-law of early settler Britton Branch Jr., died from an abscess. He was laid to rest overlooking the prairie. With that burial, sacred ground was established. Wild Cow Prairie Cemetery was born, today recognized as the second oldest cemetery in all of Sumter County. For more than 75 years, this single acre became the final chapter for the people of Pemberton Ferry. Time has not been kind here. Only a small number of headstones remain, their companions lost to weather, neglect, and vandalism. But the names we can still read paint a vivid picture of a frontier town that once thrived. Here lies James T. Pemberton, laid to rest on May 15, 1905. He was the founder of the town, the proprietor of the Pemberton Hotel, its first postmaster, and an inspector of marks and brands. He served as a county commissioner and later as a delegate of Florida's Democratic Party convention during the presidential election of 1896. Pemberton was even recommended in 1902 as Sumter County's first fish and game warden, though he died before the appointment could be finalized. Just a few feet away rests his daughter, Annie. She was only 9 years old. Annie died during the devastating yellow fever outbreak of 1888 when quarantines, fear, and uncertainty gripped communities across Florida. Her grave is a quiet reminder that pioneer life wasn't just hard, it was heartbreakingly uncertain. Among the remaining markers are veterans of the Seminole and Civil Wars, county commissioners like Charles L. Branch, Frank L. Smith, and James Weeks, and other civic leaders who helped shape early Sumter County. Historical records also show that Wild Cow Prairie Cemetery was used as a segregated burial ground for white residents, reflecting the deeply unequal social structures of the time. Research suggests that former enslaved individuals were also buried here, many in unmarked graves, their stories carried not by stone, but by soil and memory. But towns, like people, can fade. By the early 20th century, the railroad depot moved across the river. Pemberton Ferry began to wither. By the time the Great Depression arrived, the town was largely in ruins. The last known burial, that of James Hunter Pemberton, took place in 1924. Not long after, the federal government purchased the land and later leased it to the state of Florida. The former town site became part of what is now the Withlacoochee State Forest. The cemetery, once central to community life, was left behind. Vandals shattered and stole headstones. Nature closed in. Over time, it's estimated that 95 to 98% of the original markers were destroyed. Then came the most dangerous moment of all. In 2019, the land, sitting just off Interstate 75 at exit 309, was identified as prime for development. Plans were drawn for a gas station or truck stop. The idea was to relocate the visible graves and build over the rest. Nearly 170 years of history on the brink of becoming asphalt. History is rarely saved by accident. An independent researcher named Della Daughtry, along with her husband John, learned of the development plans and refused to look away. They documented the damage, combed through archives, and traced the stories of those buried here. Della founded the Sumter County Preservation Society, and a race against time began. Local advocates and creators like Florida Trailblazer brought cameras, attention, and urgency. Their documentation reached far beyond Sumter County, transforming what had once been dismissed as vacant land into a cause worth fighting for. Public pressure mounted. County officials were forced to reconsider. Passion alone wasn't enough. The preservationists needed proof. In March of 2020, ground-penetrating radar was brought in, and what it revealed changed everything. The survey confirmed 16 marked graves, but also identified 28 unmarked burials, along with 4 graves located outside the existing fence line. The cemetery was never just the small plot people could see. The pioneers were still there. Armed with that evidence, relocation plans were halted. The fence was expanded. Simple white crosses were placed to mark the unrecorded graves, restoring dignity to those nearly erased from history. That discovery marked a turning point. Wild Cow Prairie Cemetery was added to the Florida State Historic Register. Then, in 2021, it achieved the highest recognition of all, listing on the National Register of Historic Places. It became the first historic site in Sumter County to receive that designation. In 2022, descendants, preservationists, and community members gathered here for a dedication ceremony. Veterans were honored, headstones repaired and replaced, and an official historical marker was installed, ensuring that the story of Pemberton Ferry and its pioneers would never be forgotten again. History doesn't live only in textbooks. It lives in places like this, quiet, overlooked, and waiting for someone to care. If stories like these matter to you, consider subscribing and joining our community of history explorers. And tell us in the comments about a piece of forgotten history in your own backyard. Every town has a story. Every one of them deserves to be remembered. Today, when you step off exit 309, Wild Cow Prairie Cemetery stands quietly beside the highway. The roar of traffic fades into a distant hum. Graves line the ground. The prairie still breathes. This place is more than a cemetery. It's proof that Florida's wild frontier was real, that people lived, struggled, loved, and died here, and that memory, once nearly lost, can be reclaimed. The frontier isn't gone. It's just hidden, waiting for someone to stop, look closer, and listen.